So welcome everyone. I'm glad y'all are here. I'm glad that we've had such a good response to y'all attending this, wanting to learn how to write this diversity statement that you're now being asked to do for probably all of the job applications that you have seen. So, all right, so what we're doing today is basically, first of all, let's talk about just very briefly what is diversity. And I'm going to give you some definitions only because I think it's important to understand the difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion if you're not familiar with that yet. What the statement is, what it should say, and I asked y'all to brainstorm in advance, so I hope you have had some time to do that because it will really help you to think about, as I'm going through what you need to include, what is it of your perspective and experiences you can include in your diversity statement and how you might work it in. And so as we go through these slides today, you'll be able to kind of really apply what you're thinking about in real time and think about how you can work things into your statement. So, steps to do it, how to begin, and the formats, the structuring that you can use for it, okay? So I do also want to, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I want to apologize. These slides are very texty. I don't like that, but it's kind of one of those topics where it's difficult not to. And I want it to be, these slides to be a resource for you, so having the text on them basically kind of is also a transcript as well. So what I want to do first, though, since we have such a diverse group of people, I want to kind of hear from y'all, and this is going back to those questions I asked y'all to think about. What is it that, let's just do a little bit of discussion and brainstorming to kind of hear perspectives of others, since we have such a big group. What are the different types of diversity that you can think of, that things that you think you might want to talk about in your diversity statement, or that you know are important with respect to diversity and inclusion? So go ahead and type that in the chat box of what are some of your different types of diversity, and feel free also to turn on your microphones. So race, absolutely. Diversity of thought, absolutely. We've got gender, we've got economics and class, culture, race, SES, social economic status, age, nationality, religion, background, language, yes. Educational preparedness, absolutely, that's a really good one. Schooling, yes. What your experiences are, sexual identity, gender identity, ability, geographic area. These are all really great examples, really great types of diversity. Learning preferences, yes. So I want y'all to see just from this, first-time college students, yes, first generation, there is a lot of different components of who you are and your experiences that you can use to put into your diversity statement. And that's why I had those different sections in that brainstorming document for you to think about. Oh, there is a lot that I actually can talk about. So let me ask what diversity means to you. When you think about diversity, don't just think about, these different types or these different categories, but why is diversity important to you? What does it mean to you? Why are we having this conversation about how to write a diversity statement for a job, in higher education? What does diversity mean to you? So avoiding egocentrism and assuming people see things as I do, being oneself and accepted, yeah. Valuing differences, learning from others' experiences, awesome. More diversity is more perspectives, absolutely. You have, let's see, better ideas, to decenter hegemonic practices and encourage meaningful learning, yes. Variety of perspectives, allowing one to be themselves, being accepted for how I am, and not based or put in a box by others who you maybe consider you as the token for that particular group. Each student is their own individual, well-rounded set of perspectives that are indicative of the country or world population. That's a really great way to put it. Understand the differences that others may have from us. Yeah, diversity of first, second, or third person perspective. That is a cool way to describe that. Diversity from different perspectives on a moral question. Do the people who run the system reflect the people the system serves. That is so important. Yes, so treating justly and fairly, really great components of what diversity means. And we will look at many of these that y'all pulled out or talked about are things that we'll talk about that you should include, and how do you include that in your field. So again, we have 17, 18 different large disciplines, groupings. How is it defined? How is diversity defined in your field? What does it mean to have diversity in, for example, with myself, marine sciences, or diversity in the humanities, or in English versus history? How much, and then another component of that question is how much diversity is there in your field with respect to all those different categories that you talked about? So it's not well defined, and that you're right. That's right. It is part of the issue. Is it is not well defined, and you may have heard that many departments, colleges, and schools are writing up diversity statements of what it means for that discipline, for that very, very reason, because you need to know what it is and define it before you can, actually work towards increasing diversity. How is it defined in your field? Those of y'all, is there a lot of diversity in your field? What does diversity mean for your discipline? Yeah, those conducting the research. And for some, it may be the research too. Yeah, absolutely. So lots of diversity, but not a central definition. Interesting, there are groups that are not discussed as much, such as people with disabilities and refugees. Not a lot of diversity in my field at all. Yeah, and so I think, let's see, addressing the recruitment, yes, and retention practices. It's going to be subjective. Amount of diversity is going to be subjective based on our own experiences with other groups, yes. Minimal diversity, almost no inclusion, prevents people without specific training, interesting, from entering the field or even participating past elementary school. And that's a really good thing to think about, is that how is it that barriers to diversity actually restrict access from early in childhood, or is it happening later, or is it happening in the job search itself, or in looking for jobs? So there's different levels that you can consider. Our department is not nearly as diverse as the population we serve. Yeah. So yeah, if you study something that is part of, has a diversity, inclusion, equity aspect, you can help to bring more attention to that. There's diversity in subject matter, but minimal diversity in who conducts the resource and actually goes to grad school. Very interesting. There's a lot of not a lot of diversity, especially as postpartum. Interesting. That's a really interesting perspective. Is it important in your field, or how has the importance changed, perhaps, of increasing diversity, equity, inclusion in your field? Is it yet? Or are people finally saying, I guess we should do something about this, and then asking others to do that and do it for them, doing the work? Is it, how important is it? I know in marine sciences that it is, the diversity is pretty much Caucasian. Yeah. Let's see. As it relates to health disparities and injustice, absolutely, yes, it is important. Public health is vitally important. I think with the pandemic, it has really come to the forefront, thankfully, of how important, how disparate the experiences and the access is to the different groups. It should be important, but not often valued enough. It's critical. Social work, very important. Hard to seem fair and inclusive if underrepresented by staff. Absolutely. It's a hot topic in the libraries. That's awesome. But it's also people doing amazing work, but it's rooted in tokenism. That's a very good point. And I see a lot of comments, if you do like higher ed blogs and stuff, talking about how don't expect those in your department who are of that particular group to be the token person of that group. That's what tokenism means. Let's see, it is important, especially because you serve a very diverse population. Absolutely. Same with social work. You like to pioneer these conversations, but implementing them can be a challenge. Absolutely. Really good point. Awesome. Why is it diversity important in your classes that you teach? Why should we be concerned about and consider and reflect on how we teach with respect to diversity and equity and inclusion? Yes, relevance, absolutely. Relevance to your students. Teaching intentionally to reach all students and create that safe, learning environment. If you're in an environment that is very different from your experiences, it's not necessarily a safe feeling environment for you. Students need to learn about others' experiences. Yes, they need to see themselves in the content. That has to do with so much changes to the syllabus. What are your readings like? Who are the authors? That's very important. Starts in education. Help drive the change you want to see. Absolutely. Social workers, we cannot help and serve people if we don't understand the people, but all kinds. Absolutely. Thank you. Let's see. Diverse populations are going to have varying ways of understanding and relating. That's so very true. Y'all have such amazing statements here. I'm so proud of y'all. Oh my God. So context is required to synthesize information and cannot come from only one perspective. That is just absolutely true. One perspective is not perspective. It's a viewpoint, essentially. Yes. Let's see. Why do you think institutions are now asking for a diversity statement? And you can, there's a gamut of what you can say from, you know, very critical perspective to very positive perspective. Why do you think institutions are asking for these diversity statements now for job applicants? What do y'all think? First step in a long path. That's a really good point. It's a new day. Absolutely. I like that. You know, I kind of mentioned this before. The good thing from the one of the good things of the few from the pandemic is the awareness that we have. And I think that's, like you said, first step on a long path. Institutions are becoming more diverse. Absolutely. So you want to make sure that you're reflecting who your population is. So limiting liability, giving the appearance of being committed to diversity. Thank you for saying that. And I think some places are at that point. They're not at the more elevated point of this is important in and of itself type of thing. Demonstration of interest in the change, the new context of institutions, yes, requires diversity. I think it really varies based on the institution. Some seem confronting issues, enacting change. Some have noticed that everyone asked for one, so they should do so. Very good point. Gauge in applicants' awareness of the importance of diversity, yes, and the person's, yes, awareness. That's awesome. Y'all have good connection, brain connection. So diversity, equity, inclusion are three different things. Diversity, and these all come from definitions from Ford Foundation. It's a great foundation that provides funds for these types of initiatives. Diversity is representation of all of these varied identities, all the ones that y'all have talked about, whether it's as a group or as individuals, wanting to provide perspectives, a variety of perspectives from all these different groups, because it helps to really allow you to understand things in more depth. Equity is ensuring fair treatment and equality of opportunity, and fairness in access. And I think that's very important. We have seen with the pandemic that there is not equity. There's not equity in access to computers, to Wi-Fi at the very least. Creating opportunities for equal access so that people can have access to those. There was a comment someplace, I don't know where it was, I need to go find where it was, where the professor came in early one morning and saw all these cars with people in their cars in the parking lot outside of an institution, and they were people who didn't have Wi-Fi access that were sitting in the parking lot of that building so that they had access to Wi-Fi to do their homework. I mean, that's mind-boggling. So creating opportunities for underrepresented populations. Let's see, so caste. Appreciate that this definition includes caste. Yes, absolutely. We don't deal with caste here, really, but other countries do, yes. Underrepresented populations in terms of representation and distribution of those educational resources. Inclusion is building a culture of belonging by actively inviting those groups. Don't assume that you think that they know that they're welcome. They may perceive there not to be open access and inclusivity. Every person's voice adds value. And no one person should be called on, no tokenism, to represent an entire community, because they are not representative of that entire community. So these are really important things to think about what these terms mean, and hopefully these three definitions help you to understand the distinction between these as you write your your diversity statement, okay? So we talked about the possible forms of diversity. These are factors that play a role in who you are and where you are today. And I really think it's important to reflect on, we talk about, you hear about privilege, how is it that you got to the University of South Carolina? And for myself, all the different, ways I got to from Texas to South Carolina, and where my privilege allowed me easier access than others did. These are things to think about, to reflect on, because it's important to recognize those as part of who you have become. Individual differences, all these play a role in where and who you are. Group and social differences. So y'all mentioned these. Y'all mentioned learning style, life experiences, familial status and upbringing. That's really a big one that really isn't talked about very much. Physical cognitive abilities, culture, political, religious, other affiliations that can impact who you are and where you are and why you are where you are, okay? All right, why it matters. So of course, some graphs of distributions of demographics, because they show a very important pattern. Students of color, almost 30% of undergrads, and this is in 1996, have increased to 45% of undergrads in 2016. So in 10 years, they have almost doubled. Graduate students of color have increased from 20 to 32%. So having a diverse, not just population, but staff and faculty, so it's representative of the students you have, is very, very important. Another interesting thing in this graph is that if you notice, there's been a downtick in Black, there has been an increase in Hispanic, and then white tends to be about the same, with the purple being the overall change. Compare that to that undergraduates, college enrollments of recent high school or equivalent graduates. Let's look at faculty. Faculty are strongly dominant white, 73%, Hispanic 4%, 5% is Black. And so this is why we're seeing that sometimes there's this disconnect between what faculty think is important and valuable and information that students need to learn versus what actually is based on student experiences. So we want our higher education institutions to reflect the populations that they are serving, essentially. Why does it matter? So y'all talked about this already. It promotes academic and workplace achievement, increases communication between your team, productivity, problem solving. People have different experiences and therefore have learned to solve problems and think through things in different ways, different styles, different perspectives. It's in higher ed, recruitment and retention of students from those underrepresented communities hinges, and one of y'all said this, often people will apply to and go to institutions that are more representative of who they are. It can be a detriment to have 90% white faculty if you are a person of color. Do they actually understand and can relate to you and recognize that you may have differences of learning that they have not ever experienced before, and vice versa. It is part of USC's strategic plan. So this is the strategic plan, equity inclusion plan. This is, if you've not seen this, I think it's really important to see what the university is actively doing, the strategies that they're using, engaging the community. Of course, you can click on these and see more information. We just hired Dr. Julian Williams, who's doing an amazing job, really hit the ground running on these initiatives. We also have, I wanted to show y'all, let me pull this up, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we have an Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. We have a council of academic officers. So every college and school has an academic officer who is part of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So if you ever are curious and want to talk with someone about, these issues, these would be the people you would go talk to in your discipline. They have depth and breadth of knowledge of DEI issues in these particular disciplines. Okay, so there's a lot of them. Some great folks there. Let's see. Okay, so what now? So what is a statement of contributions to diversity? So essentially, and that's just another way of the title, but it's a statement that addresses your past and or your potential contributions to diversity through your teaching, your research, your professional activities, and your service. And so when I say diversity, I am meaning at the same time DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion as a whole, but just kind of as by convention, I say diversity, okay? It explains your experiences, your skills that you have, your commitment and your willingness to engage in those DEI initiatives. And that is something that we'll look at in a second, how you want to talk about that in your diversity statement of how you want to get involved. What is it? What aspects you know that the university is doing that you are interested in getting involved with. What you include will vary depending on your experiences, what you have done, what what your groups are, what you believe. And so I want you to keep that in mind, that you may see people saying these things that you've never considered before. That's okay, because that's not necessarily what your experiences are or your field. Your diversity statement will look completely different from anybody else's, and it should. But do know that and I read this whenever I was doing research on this, and I loved the statement. There is not a perfect unicorn statement. So yours is not, you don't expect to have this perfect one that is just the shining star. It needs to be personal, needs to be you, your experiences, your beliefs, your thoughts on improvement, okay? I love it. I meant to look for a unicorn picture, but I didn't. Oh, well. Anyway. So, all right. Why are you being asked? So we talked about this. What these statements show, what you say in these statements, shows your commitment to contributing to those DEI initiatives, those goals with respect to increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also, it shows you know what to do. You know how to achieve those goals, or what is valued, or what can contribute to moving towards those goals, to be a part of this diverse community. And what it is that you individually will bring to that specific institution in terms of DEI. And this is, I think, an important thing to realize, is that everybody will bring different things. So it's important to be honest with what it is you can bring. Don't, and I talk about this a little bit later, don't make things up, because you'll get called on it and get fired if you actually had gotten hired. Talk about what it is, how you, as your experience, your entire time of experiences and beliefs and values, how you can take that and put that, or help the university improve as a result of your experiences. Leverage that. That was the word I was looking for. I used to laugh when people use leverage, and I use it all the time now. It's a useful word. Anyway, so what it should show. Again, like I said, I apologize for the textiness, but I hope that this is helpful for y'all. It demonstrates your awareness of the obstacles that underrepresented or the economically disadvantaged groups have and confront in just trying to access higher education. So you're aware of the issues, that you have cultural competence, or you're developing it. You understand those issues, and how marginalized groups and students can be supported and need support, okay? That you have this personal engagement, that you have been doing this. It shows that you have actually been doing this through your career, if you have been with underrepresented communities, and how you bring it into your teaching and your scholarship. And it will show, depending on how you write this, which we'll get into a little bit, your capacity to respond in pedagogical ways, and how you teach, and are able to bring the different DEI perspectives into your teaching responsibilities, and how you work with students and address the needs of students. And then how you will use your awareness and all these different aspects in very concrete ways. So in your statement, and like I said, we'll talk about this in a bit as well, you want to have concrete, this is what I can do, this is what I would like to do, this is how I can contribute. Not that I can help with diversity, but there needs to be practical, concrete examples that you put into it that are tied directly to that institution's DEI statements and their the things that they're trying to do, their actual, what was the word I was looking for? The goals. I don't know why I didn't think of that word. Anyway, so how you will be able to use your awareness to contribute to them. So I do want to, oh, and also that you're a genuine person. You actually, you care. You want to make a difference. You want to help. You recognize how important DEI is and its value, and you want to be part of the solution, essentially. Now, one thing I want to say, and I think this is really important to kind of, just digest and think about, your social identity, who you are, your race, your ethnicity, all of that, it's not being in question at all. If it is, then that's a problem, and that might not be an institution you want to go to. You are simply being asked how you will contribute to these goals of the institution, to the advancement of your field, how you support and help appreciate and contribute, appreciate the contributions of all members of your particular academic community and at that institution, okay? All right, so what if you have very little experience? And that's very common, and I totally understand that many of us have been in that position already. And so what you want to do is recognize that there are many people who have not experienced very many issues. Again, they haven't experienced those issues. They recognize that they have had privilege. And if that's the case, that you recognize that, good. So what do? You then can still demonstrate a commitment to the DEI issues, commitment to diversity and equity. So what you'll then do instead is you'll describe what you would do to support the DEI initiatives, tied in again to what the institution has stated that they value. And what this also allows you to do is an opportunity to customize that statement, as I said, to the school that you're applying to and the context in which you're applying. Meaning, is it a teaching position or is it a research position? How do I tailor what I think I can do, how I can contribute with respect to that particular context. It also is important, as I give you this example here, what you would do to support DEI in a school in the South is very different from what would be possibly in the Northwest, for example. Okay, so it is very important. Customization is very, very important. Okay, so some expectations of what this is going to look like. First of all, you hope, and I'm sure, like someone said earlier about they're doing it because everyone else is, but any university that is requesting this is committed to inclusivity. USC very much is so, and they are committed to supporting their diverse population and is looking for someone who would be supportive of that mission and can contribute in some meaningful way. Now, these statements are not necessarily standard. They can be asked in different formats. It can be just a prompt. You may be given a specific prompt to answer. All right, oops, sorry. So you may be asked for a one-page statement. There may be word counts. It may be something that you're asked to include in your cover letter, in your teaching statement, in your personal statement, if they ask for one of those, in your research statement. You're like, holy crap. So there are different ways where this can be worked into depending on what they request. And how much weight it is given by the institution will vary. And you can kind of glean what weight it will be given by doing your research at the university, at the institution, seeing what their, where does this fit into their strategic plan? Who do they have as officers? Is it a vice provost, or is it just, a director of an office? Is there structure to that office? Is there support? Those types of things. See what they've actually been doing already, and that will help give you an idea of how important this will be as part of your packet of your application documents. Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's important, especially as they prepare to enter clinical residency. Absolutely. And this is something not just for job applications for faculty, but I think, like you said, that this is something as you go into residency, as you go into other perhaps jobs outside of the university, this is still going to be a very important component. So let's look at these steps to writing your diversity statement. So the first step basically is reflection. So y'all have hopefully already started doing that. I wanted you to start looking at the questions and thinking, but if you haven't already done so, start kind of writing out your thoughts. Get those thoughts out on paper. Really kind of flesh out what you think, how you feel about these things. You may have never done this yet, and that's why you're here, which is awesome. So you need to start really thinking about that and getting those ideas on paper in some fashion. What are your past or present experiences that have helped to shape your understanding of DEI and how you value it. These experiences typically are only a small part of the statement because there's other important things you need to include as well. You may want to describe how diversity has affected your learning and development based on social economic status, experiences, where you lived, all sorts of different things, how you interact with people and institutions, how it's impacted how you interact with people, how diversity has affected others' learning and development through your research and teaching, so how you have impacted others' views of DEI as a result of what you've done with people that you've interacted with. Okay. Some other things you can think of if you are a part of a diverse group itself. Talk about your experiences and how being a part of that group, how you have been impacted by things that have happened, the experiences that have happened that are related to DEI. Write about things you've done, initiatives or actions you've taken to promote DEI, whether it's in academy or outside of academy in the community. If you've participated in social or professional groups that promote DEI, which a lot of them really are now, they're getting subgroups to help develop that to support their members who are part of these different groups. Write about why you decided to join the group and what you've done and how you've interacted with them and how the impact it has had on that community. Community being academic community or social community, whatever it might be. What are your future plans? This is a very important part. This ties into the plans of the institution, but also what you would like to do, whether it's with your teaching, your research, what you have thought about that you want to do. This is something you will want to put into your DEI statement. What are some things that can be considered? So in those questions I sent to y'all, many of these things were asked as questions. Does your research involve social inequities? And I know several of y'all do. Social inequities, inequalities, power or interactions between different groups. Describe that research, what it is, how your research is involved with those aspects of DEI. How does your research speak to the issues that are tied into those groups, how it ties into scholarship and programs on campus? Is your research something that could be supportive of some of those initiatives that that institution has, and talk about how it can be supportive? How do you create an environment of inclusion in your lab and among your colleagues? This is really important because you're talking about, how do I encourage DEI perspectives around me and the people that work for me? And how do you address issues of diversity and DEI in your own research and in your writing? So this might be something that you've written, either you've brought in aspects into your research, or you've written about it as part of a compendium, whatever it might be. So scholarly work, essentially. So teaching. What courses do you teach that have DEI? There's a lot of them. What topics, even within a course, are there topics that are related to DEI? How have you brought that into your course? What is your approach? Several of y'all actually talked about learning styles and background on how it impacts how you learn. How do you adjust learning activities to meet the diversity in your students and encourage engagement with your students, engagement in the different topics? Do you mentor different groups? Mentorship is a very important component, and it was a set of questions because of that that you absolutely should talk about because it's valued. Mentorship is a huge part of success of students, especially first-generation students, being able to move forward, staying in academia, much less graduating, but even staying and moving forward to different levels of academia. And then show with your teaching how diversity informs your approach. Basically, what have you done? What are some accomplishments of how you've incorporated it into how you teach, what you teach, that shows how you have committed to improve your teaching with respect to DEI, okay? Any questions about teaching aspects or any of those teaching brainstorming questions? And I've got, I should have numbered those. I didn't think about that. Here is that statement. Oops, hello. So general reflection, research, teaching. Do you have any questions on any of those questions? These are more detailed, obviously. Okay. Okay, service. This seems to be an obvious one, but there's a lot of different components to service that can be considered if you feel like you don't have that experience. So academic, professional, community service, things that you would not necessarily list on your CV. You do not want a rehash of your CV. Don't do that. They don't want to read that. They want to have the more personal things that would not have been mentioned. Like I said, mentoring, underrepresented undergrads, discussing how you're involved in different types of service or leadership positions in those types of organizations, and what you've done as a part of and as a leader in those groups. And then how have you encouraged students to engage in DEI aspects outside of the classroom? Have you done things within class, done service learning so that you encourage students to participate and go out into the community in some way? And I know many of y'all have done that, and your classes do those types of things. Talk about those. Personal. So how has your life been shaped by the various, I talked about this, the various academic and social positions that you occupy? And again, this is one of the things where it's a little bit difficult to start thinking about, because it really brings up, guilt and all sorts of different things about how you feel like maybe you have this privilege and it's not, you feel guilty about it, or how your life has really been affected by some of these issues and things that have happened tied to these issues. You can put this into the statement. You don't have to, but you can, especially if it has allows you to discuss those experiences in the context of connecting them to your inclusion of DEI in your research, teaching, and service. So how have these experiences really colored or crafted your viewpoint into DEI, and how you now take that and really put it into your work that you do, how you contribute. Keep in mind that hardships are subjective, and I think this is important for y'all to really kind of think about. People's experiences have shaped how others define a hardship, and so what might be a hardship to you may not have been to someone else based on their own personal or prior experiences, because they've overcome it in a certain way. They were able to work through it differently because of their experiences. So don't feel like it's a challenge to be able to say my issues are harder than yours, so I'm a better person to be hired for this. That's not what that's not what they're looking for. Like I said, hardships are subjective. You want to, if you talk about them, if you bring them into the statement, again, tie them to what it has done to help you to value and incorporate DEI issues into your scholarly and personal and service work. Okay. Okay. Now, I've given you, and I'll send you these links as well. There are some other good prompts out there, aside from the ones that I gave y'all in those links. Let's see. Yeah, so this one I really pulled from this one, but let's see, this handout has a lot of different prompts that you can look at, writing a statement, service-related contributions. It talks about different examples, success advising women, minorities, teaching students with disabilities, developing curriculum. So again, if you're kind of stumped into what you can include, visit these sites, and that I think will also help you to think about what to include. So that was step one, reflecting, which is a very important one, obviously. And then step two, sorry about that, do your research. So important. Research the diversity at the institution you are applying to. And I know this is a lot of work. If you are putting in 10, 20, 30 plus applications, each one of those you do, I mean, for your teaching statement and research statement too, you do have to tailor it to that institution. So what is the university and the department's mission to DEI? So go to their website, maybe look at this, if they have a center or an office like we do of DEI. Many departments, especially here at UC, have developed their own websites for DEI. Go look at that and see what it is that they are saying are their values and their missions. What is the demographic makeup of the student body? Every university has a data warehouse that has that information, and it's somewhere on their website, and you can actually probably find the data sets or even the graphs of what their institution looks like. Do they have more, transfer students, or do they have more of one demographic versus another? Another way that can really help you to kind of think about and look at what their perspective is going on LinkedIn and looking at the profiles of the leadership, both in the higher administration, but in the people who are in the DEI center or office as well. That will give you some good perspective. Okay. What kind of diversity committees or structures do they already have in place? Are they kind of like USC, where they've had some, but now they're really pushing forward on developing more, or have they had some for a very long time? Are there programs and projects that you can connect with, help with, contribute to? Those are things you would mention. Customize these statements that would talk about how you can contribute to these different aspects that that institution has, and how, and I say the context to which you're applying. Every institution, what it is that they value is part of a different context, whether it's the context of the environment of that institution, the broader city, the broader state or region, and use that to then tailor your statement to address that context. And that will be very obvious in their statement about what it is that they value, as well as your research that you do. Okay. So how do you contribute to the university's goals? Through your research, teaching, and service of their goals of DEI. And then address, and this again goes to the context, the needs of the department and university, their short and long-term goals. There's lots of different parts that you as the applicant can say, I can help here. This is an example of how I've done this. I think that I can help by doing this, tied to this goal or this mission statement. Okay. Okay, now, so doing your research, now customize. As I said, we've talked about a little bit. Really do now take what you've done the research on and then start threading those reflections in step one and really kind of weave into what the institution is looking for, and weave in those reflective parts of your perspective and values and experiences, and show how you can really connect and tie into the institution's goals, and how you can help make contributions, valuable contributions, because here is my experience tied directly to what it is that you actually value as that institution. And as I already mentioned, when you're customizing it, depending on how much personal information you want to share, remember again that context is key, that demographic information that you do share, frame it in with respect to how you engage in the community and engage with those initiatives, and how it has developed your understanding of DEI issues. Don't just talk about, these personal issues that have happened just for the sake of talking about them, saying I have had this happen to me. You really need to tie it into the narrative that you're providing. Okay. Now, step 4. Deciding, so we have talked about now what you need to put in the statement. You need to do the reflection, the research, and then the customization and the weaving together. So this is giving you an idea of things that you can start writing about, and start putting together ideas of flow of those ideas. Now, how do you then put it on paper? What is the structure of that? There's a lot of different ways you can do this, fortunately. Now, all statements should have: what are your values related to DEI? What are your experiences with respect to these different aspects of DEI, teaching, research, service, personal, professional? And then what do you plan to do, or ideas that you have that you want to do in the future to support DEI, tailored to the context of the institution? okay? All statements should have that. Now, how it's presented depends on what you want to do. You do, however, want to make sure that your experiences of discrimination, privilege, whatever the experience is, that it shows that you are aware of what's going on, especially the academic conversations that are going on right now, because of the pandemic, so much is being talked about now about DEI. If you know of particular aspects of DEI in your discipline that have really come to the forefront in the news, maybe work that in, because that is something that is at the forefront of the institutions right now, knowing that this is something that's important that needs to be considered. If there's a way you can contribute to that at their institution, talk about that, okay? Now, formats, here's just one. So there's about 5 formats that I'm showing y'all. And I'm not going to read through all these. I'm just going to kind of summarize what these are. You can just have the general structure, just a typical statement. Who you are, your experiences, your strengths and experiences with respect to diversity, what you've experienced, how you've overcome it, programs you've involved yourself with, changed your research or shaped your research to include diversity, how you can contribute to the institution, and then ways you are willing to contribute to enhance diversity. So kind of concrete examples, specific examples. So this is just a typical kind of essay type of structure. So that's one way you can do it. Another way is a statement as a narrative. And so this allows you to use narrative of your personal experiences, past, present, and future, to then, with those different perspectives, those different time points, then talk about how that then has helped you craft ideas of what to do at that institution. How do you approach diversity as a result of those experiences? How do you apply the knowledge that you have learned in the future? And so what this approach does allows you to think about how your approach to diversity and your values and opinions have changed over time, and it shows how you've adapted to new environments and have taken it and run with it, and know how to take some possibly adverse situation or some type of experience and mold it into something that's positive, essentially. So that's another way, a narrative statement. A third genre is statement is your commitment to. So prioritize what your commitments are. What is it that you want to do? What is it you want to try and see happen? You want to be a part of increasing or developing. How have you made your classroom accessible? How have you invested in diversity, worked with specific groups, commitments to diversity in research and teaching? What this does is this allows you to think about how diversity is a part of everything of you as an academic, and how you connect who you are as an academic, both inside the classroom and research and outside as well, okay? Now that's genre 3. Genre 4 is the teaching narrative. So this does now depend on what kind of institution you're applying to. This would be something for more of a teaching college, for your teaching private institutions, whatever it might be. How do you foster diverse student perspectives integrated into your teaching, your course materials, controversial topics. This allows you to show what is distinctive about you and how you have positively impacted students and served students, okay? And then genre 5 is autobiographical. So it is different from the number 2 statement is narrative, past, present, and future, past experiences. The autobiographical one is you as an individual. So yes, it does bring in those experiences, but it talks about tying it to you as an individual and you as your perspective and your value sets and your mindset. So you can self-identify with some of those different groups if you want, or just talk about experience with teaching or research. Talk about your experiences as a member of those different groups. And so there are fine detailed differences between these. There are some similarities, but there are some differences as well. How you have grown to understand and value diversity over your education and instructional experiences, and how you've been impacted by diversity through your academic career, okay? So a lot of things to think about. Which one of these you think being perhaps a better perspective to present versus others? Does anybody, and you may not have any idea right now, you're going to have to go back and let this digest a little bit, but does anybody have an idea of which one they think they would perhaps choose versus another? General, narrative, commitment, teaching, or autobiographical. Anyone have a thought that they might do? Which one? Or have already done, perhaps? I think mine would probably be the teaching one and the commitment one, either one of those. Any thoughts? Autobiographical, okay. Commitment, possibly autobiographical. Yeah, I like the commitment one. Oh, that's a really commitment or narrative. I like what you said. I've tried to combine too many of these. Yeah, narrowing the focus. And that's a really good point. Recognize that these are, you can try and put it in so many different ways of viewing it that it becomes really muddy and your voice gets hidden. So by choosing a genre, that really helps to make sure that what you're trying to say is much more clear, essentially. Commitment feels like it has actions, and you could talk about teaching. Yes, I definitely agree. Okay, good. All right, so some don'ts, of course, what not to do. Avoid comparisons, and as I said, I was going to talk about this a little bit later. Avoid comparisons that equate diversity or equity experiences, that my experiences are better than yours, are worse than yours, you know, equating groups. Equating groups diminishes the unique concerns that each group has and the issues that are associated with them. And the fact that you equate these groups, that diversity and equity experiences, your experience is similar to this experience in this other group, shows that you don't get it. You don't understand the fine complexity that there is inherent in the experiences of these different underrepresented groups. Don't generalize about groups. I think we're all aware of this now, generalization about groups based on your interactions or your hidden biases that you are becoming more aware of. No saving narratives. I think that's an important thing to hear, that we don't want, they don't want, no one wants to read, oh, this is what I did, and then it just made these people just the best people, and I improved their lives, blah, blah, blah. No, don't do that. That really is that savior narrative that you don't want to come across, because it's very egotistical. There is a, you know, you don't want that to come across to the hiring committee, because it will come out, they'll hear that, essentially. Don't create a minority experience or minoritize some aspect. If you're not a part of that group, then that is not an experience for you. So don't create one that's not there. And don't say that yours gives you a beautiful, clear understanding of what everyone else experienced. It does not. Your experience is yours. It has tailored and, you know, really impacted how you view things. It is unique to you, and everyone else's is unique to them. So just because you had an experience that is similar, it doesn't mean that it has impacted you and that other person the same way. It has not, because of y'all's very different backgrounds and histories and that sort of thing. Okay. Some other pitfalls is not being specific. So if y'all have taken my teaching statement workshop, you know how important it is to give those examples. Show that you've done it, or that you have the ideas of how to implement DEI into your research. Don't restate your CV, and really highlight ones that you know are really important, have really shown aspects of your value and your commitments. Not telling the truth. If you've not had experiences, don't, you know, make it up. Talk about how you then would approach doing it, and how ideas that you have perhaps seen and would like to implement in your teaching, for example. And then don't forget to revise. Revise not just with respect to grammar, but have someone else, not necessarily in your field or discipline specifically, but outside of your discipline, read it, because their perspective is very different, and things that you think would be a good thing to talk about may come across very differently to someone else outside of your field, and also outside of your personal experiences as well. So have someone else read it, for sure. And I recommend, not that I want to give the Cato officers a lot more work, but they would be someone that would be good to bounce ideas off of. Perhaps just read a paragraph or a very, very rough draft to skim over this. Does this sound right? Is this something I should include? They're the experienced ones. They have the depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge to be able to say, that's probably, you should perhaps, phrase it differently, or this is another way to view this type of experience, those sorts of things. Here's some bad examples. So while teaching, I want to create an environment that is receptive. Not only do I use diversity in my teaching methods, I focus on issues pertaining to diversity, to students to talk about diverse issues. So aside from there being a lot of diversity, what's wrong with this example? Not specific. That's right. That's a lot of hand-waving, kind of fluffy, floofy words that you could probably have just taken straight from a website. Don't do that. Have concrete examples. Yep, very, very generic. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Let's look at another one. I learned to accept the complexity of my subject position as a person in a diverse society. Yes, centers whatever is considered non-diverse. Oh, that's a good point. In this way, my identity was not defined by a minority profile by what I am not. I am neither self nor other, but a self that has come into its own through its encounter with otherness. As I prepared to blah, 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 I keep the forefront of my mind the importance of instilling this critical lesson through my activities as research teacher, writer, mentor. So what is wrong with that? Y'all are awesome. That was a lot of words. That was very, yes. What is it you just said? I am neither self nor other, but a self that has come into its own to encounter with otherness. Yes, it is. It's very much self-praise through a very kind of scholarly, dense way of writing. Yeah, I like that you said that, because it really truly is. I am wonderful. I can think this deep thoughts that you cannot understand. I don't know what that was doing. Yeah. And it's not really diversity. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's more of, this is how wonderful I am and how I can, improve your lives, not someone else's. Here's a couple of quotes. I love people of all backgrounds. Oh my God. I'm just going to pin that right there. And here's another one. I am diverse, so why do I need to talk about this? And I think that's a good thing to think about. So if you are a part of one of these underrepresented groups, and you think about, so I have these experiences. Now take those experiences and show what you can do with it, because you will really be able to say, this is the experience I've had. This has now, changed and colored my perspective. And this is now, because of that, I recognize this and I want to do this and I have done this. Okay. So yes, you do need to talk about it, because it will show those who are in the hiring that you have that experience with respect to that personal perspective. Okay. All right. So what committees look for? Basically, awareness of the inequities and challenges that people face by students, by faculty, underrepresented minorities. That you have a track record. And so some of you may be saying, oh my God, I don't. Well, this is, of course, you don't yet have, probably. So this is commensurate to career stage. That you're thinking about this and you have started doing this. For many of you, that's where you're at, and that's totally fine. That you have the record of activities that can help reduce the barriers or increase participation and representation. And that you have a vision and plans. This is just as important as the other two, for how your work can contribute to the institution's mission, serve their students. How you as a person and your experiences can meld with and really work into and weave into that institution's environment, essentially. So, of course, there are rubrics for them, and I gave y'all some links. Again, I'll send y'all these links out just so you can see. There are rubrics for you to assess your diversity statement, and I like these. These are actually really cool. So they show you awareness, weak, average, strong; experience, weak, average, strong. So these are really neat to kind of think about not only, what they are going to be looking at, but if you have some experience that you're writing out. This is another really good one. This is from UC Berkeley, of course, that, sample rubric. Here it is: 1 to 2, 3, 4 to 5, track record 1 through 5. So there's just a little bit more finer divisions of good versus bad. And the reason why I show you these is that, and talk about this, is that if you have something that you're writing about that is getting the score of 1 or 2 or weak, you should probably take that out of your statement because it's not serving you well in a statement that has limited space for you to write about. Okay. All right. So next steps, go write. Your brain is full right now. You're like, wow, I have so many things I want to think about. Even if all you write out are phrases and remember this and high school, 3rd grade in Mrs. Jones' class, get those ideas out. Realize, like with other statements, you will have many versions. Keep them all. You will probably use some parts for one institution that you might not use for another. So don't waste the time, or don't make yourself give yourself more work by having to rewrite something that you actually wrote well before but perhaps didn't use. Save all those versions. Consider that there is good connection between your values and your practice. You may say you value something, but then you don't talk about it and it doesn't show in your practice. There's a disconnect there. Can you make it more succinct? If you have one story that takes up an entire page, you need to condense that in some way, and those outside readers can help that. So know that you can write an amazing statement. That's why you're here, is to be able to do this and write these statements. So I'll send you again these links. These are some other request formats of what universities in their job application websites, what it looks like and what it asks for. So it kind of gives you a perspective of that, of what you might see. But I wanted to give about 5 more minutes. We have time for questions that y'all might have. Yes, oh, of course, y'all are welcome. I often, when I've done this before, I've gotten really good questions. So if you have anything that's been on your mind about what you can or cannot include or how you might phrase it, please ask the questions. Ask all the questions. Let's see, so I'm reading your comments. So these issues are broader than diversity statements. Yes, oh, absolutely. How many grad students at USC are searching for resources and faculty support? Are there existing cohorts beyond some of the fellowships, or the possibility of organizing cohorts around DEI issues? So that is a very good question. And to let you know, the university just hired a faculty, what is her name? It just came out in the email, a faculty person that represents faculty DEI issues, programming, and that sort of thing. So yes, there is going to be, and we have just started that. I need to find that email because she's awesome. She's been working with the CTE. How can the CTE help and tie in with the ODEI office to develop programming for faculty, and faculty including graduate students? So y'all are part of the faculty. So yes, this is something that has been thought of. Yes, thank you. Director of Diversity, Education, and Inclusive Excellence for ODEI, the faculty director. So she is going to be involved in a lot of different aspects of the DEI initiative at USC. So she would be the person that, if there are ways that GSA, Graduate Student Association, can become involved, they would talk with her for sure. Yeah, it's really exciting. Very, very exciting that she has finally been hired. We have finally hired somebody, and she's awesome. I looked at her track record of where she came from and her experiences. It's amazing. She is so great. We do have one. There's the TTIE one. This is, well, it's teaching towards inclusive excellence. It's not necessarily a diversity inclusion for research and service as well. So that would be something that you would talk to the provost about and say, hey, and I bet Dr. Kassenbaum is going to start probably developing a certificate of some sort or a program that you can participate in with respect to DEI across higher ed in general. I am sure that's part of her initiatives. Yes, I know. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I know that was a lot of information, and I feel bad about the literal fire hose, but I want y'all to have it so you can go home and, like the word I love to use, digest it, and really start kind of thinking through things and then starting to put words down.